Let's talk about 5 pitchers Chris is higher on. Up next on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Thursday, December 4th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Chris Towers. Let's take a look at 5 pitchers that Chris is higher on than consensus right now. And first up, we have Joe Ryan, who, Chris, you have up at SP14, a little bit higher than ADP. He's at SP17. What do you like about Joe Ryan heading into next season?
So I think one thing we can all do better at, us as a podcast, us as a nation, is we need to think more about our whip in fantasy baseball because, there's so much talk about ERA and xERA and FIP and Sierra and all this stuff, or strikeout. We focus so much on strikeouts, and for good reasons. These things matter. But whip tends to get left by the wayside a little bit in our discussions of pitchers. And I've noticed when I have weaknesses in my pitching staffs, it's often I've got these high strikeout pitchers who can run good ERAs even, but then I look at the whip and I'm like, first in strikeouts and 11th in whip. And it's like, how did that happen? My pitching staff was so good. And guys like Joe Ryan are undervalued as a result of that because he is an elite whip guy. I know his ERA can fluctuate and, he doesn't necessarily have the super high ERA ceiling. It's usually in the mid threes. 2023, I think, was a 4.5 ERA. So there's some concern there, but man, the whip is always really good. Usually 1-1, 1-0, 1-0-3. So I'll take that from Joe Ryan. He's not a huge workhorse, but he'll get you 190 or so strikeouts. He's done that 2 of the last 3 seasons when he's been healthy. So I just think maybe there's a little bit of ERA risk with Joe Ryan, but the whip help, that's something you don't necessarily get from a lot of pitchers.
Let's move over to Dylan Cease, who you have as your SP17. He is on the rise in 6 drafts since Thanksgiving. The ADP is up to SP19. I think people getting a little excited about Dylan Cease signing with the Blue Jays. Chris, we don't know which version of Dylan Cease is going to show up, but my guess is you are expecting one of the better versions.
Yeah, who cares about whip anyway, right? You just draft Dylan Cease. No, in Dylan
How about
Cease's
you draft
case,
him and Joe Ryan together, and then it works out very well.
Yeah, and then you'll just have a mediocre whip. No, in Dylan Cease's case, we have, in the last 4 seasons, we have 2 really good ones and 2 really bad ones. 4.5 ERA or worse. I think 4.45 and 4.48, something like that. Those are really bad. And last year was 4.55, really bad, 133 whip. Okay, I get it. Not good. If you actually look at the skills, though, 2023 is the bad year. 2025 is just the bad luck year for Dylan Cease. Like, he had a super low strand rate. He had a super high BABIP. The xERA, the FIP, Sierra, whatever you want to look at, was right where you always expect it to be, 350-ish. It's not an elite ERA, and I don't think you should expect that from Dylan Cease. But what you should expect is great volume. He hasn't missed a start with an injury since like 2019. He had a forearm cramp last year. That was the only scare he's had in like the last 5 years. You're going to get 215 strikeouts. He's done that 5 straight years. He's the only pitcher to do that. I think it's going to be a mid-3s ERA. I think it's going to be more like a 1.15 to 1.12 or 1.2 whip, which isn't great, but is fine. So I just think we're going to get a much better version of Dylan Cease. I think we had kind of everything go wrong for him last season, and the skills were still very strong. So I'm very bullish on Dylan Cease figuring it out. Won't hurt that I think he's going to be on a better team in 2026 as well with the Blue Jays.
On top of all that, it should be a better defense behind him as well in Toronto versus where he was at previously in San Diego. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back in FBT Express. Let's take a look at a few more pitchers that Chris is higher on right now. And Gerrit Cole. Chris, you have all the way up at SP28. He's 35 years old, coming off Tommy John surgery with the internal brace. He had that early March of last year. The hope is that he's back in May. His early ADP, SP68. So people are a little nervous, a lot of nervous about Gerrit Cole.
I think maybe it's just people are kind of out of sight, out of mind on Gerrit Cole. And I think what's going to happen is the Yankees have mentioned he's already been throwing off mounds as he returns from his Tommy John surgery. He's expected to be cleared to face pitchers at some point or face hitters at some point during spring training. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see Gerrit Cole get on the mound. He's going to be about a month further removed from his surgery than Spencer Strider was last year. Different type of surgery, so maybe it'll take a little longer. But if we see him on a mound, I think what's going to happen is that price is going to start jumping really, really quickly. Maybe he's not back until May. Given his age, given the workload that he's put up, given, you look at like Sandy Alcantara. Nobody throws 170 innings in their first year back from Tommy John surgery. Well, aces, workhorses, however you want to call it, they're different. They get treated differently, and I think Gerrit Cole will be treated differently. I think he'll have a faster schedule. Maybe he won't be any good, but this is a guy we were talking about, the consensus number one pitcher last year, and has been in that number one SP discussion for years. So I think when people actually see Gerrit Cole and they start to remember that he's going to be pitching early in 2026, that price is going to rise a lot.
Next up, we have Ranger Suarez, who, Chris, you have at SP31. The early ADP, SP55. I will point out, NFBC drafters typically, deflate some cost here on pitchers that haven't signed yet. So I think maybe just a little worry about where he's going to wind up. But either way, Ranger Suarez has been a very productive pitcher the past 2 seasons.
I do think there is some value in specifically looking like a Ranger Suarez and saying, I'll let MLB teams tell me what they think about him, because he's a kind of a weird guy. We've seen really high ceiling outcomes from him, but usually only for a couple of months at a time. Last year was kind of the first time that we've seen Ranger Suarez really avoid a big step back after seeming to break out. He was good for basically the whole season, and now we've got this 2-year stretch, 3.33 ERA, really good control. I think wherever he lands, assuming it's on, the $80 to $100 million contract that we've been talking about him getting, I think we're going to see that price rise. Maybe SP31's a little too high for a guy that doesn't have the strikeout upside, doesn't have the innings upside. I can be talked into moving him down, but I think that the ADP price is way too low.
And the last name here we have...
Sandy? Tell me about it, stud.
Sandy Alcantara, who you have at SP33. The early ADP is SP50. First year back from Tommy John surgery. It was a tale of 2 seasons. Got off to a terrible start, but in the second half looked a lot like Sandy Alcantara.
Yeah, I think this is one that once he figured it out, and you started to see it around midseason, he started to have a lot more of those deep starts. You started to, the stuff was good the whole time, right? Like he was averaging 97 miles per hour with his fastball right away. And the stuff plus metrics were pretty good. They were pretty close to where they had always been. It was the command. It was the feel. That stuff wasn't there early on. Once he started to figure it out later in the summer, he ran off that stretch in the final 12 starts, 3.13 ERA, averaged like 6.5 innings per start. I think he was back to being who he is. And who he is the best, the highest volume pitcher in baseball. And I think that's going to be true no matter where he pitches. He's someone who's going to go deep into games. You got to fight to get the ball out of his hands. Once we saw him get back to being a low 3s ERA pitcher, I feel pretty good that that's what he's going to be. I'll take the big volume. Presumably he's going to be traded. That hasn't happened yet, but should be on a better team, although the Marlins were like an 80-win team last year, so it's not like it was a terrible situation for him. I think on the whole, he's pretty much back to where he was prior to the injury. Maybe it's not winning the Tommy John or winning the Cy Young. Maybe he's not throwing 230 innings, but I think if you can bet on anyone getting to 200 innings, it's probably Sandy Alcantara. So you're going to get 180 strikeouts, maybe 190 strikeouts from him. I think you're going to get good ERA from him. And in a points league especially, I think he's going to be a great value.
All right, for more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye!